To pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, I have the minutes in front of me from the February 20th meeting. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Okay, adjustments. Any comments or adjustments to the meetings? I have a couple minor ones. Under number 5, it says subcommittee report. Second line pointed out that it should be operational costs, not operational capital. And then in the 1, 2, 4th line, it says, and determining the strategic value is the third, it should say is the goal. There. And then on page 2, second paragraph, 3rd line, I would just change the word pie chart to a graphical approach. And then the next paragraph in the middle says, on the 3rd line, the Academy project was able to proceed as originally planned. Make that adjustment. Any other comments from anybody else?
Only that minutes don't have to be so detailed. It just
Well,
has to really be.
it just a sentence is where it's finished, yeah, okay.
I'm just saying that they really, you just need to, say that they're capturing it. Really, votes is really what had it, but, so.
Okay.
Don't feel you have to have a complete record. It's not a transcript at all, the conversation.
As amended, is all in favor of accepting these minutes? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Okay, thank you. We distributed the updated the interim report based on last month and a couple of follow-up conversations that have had. Does everybody have a copy? I printed out a few extra copies.
Yeah, an extra one.
I don't have a printout. I'll take what printout. Thanks. I just have one. If it's an extra.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I made a few extra. The only changes that are being made at this stage, can you bring up the
Yep.
interim report, the latest version? It should be dated March 20th. If you don't have it, I'll send it to you.
Did you get any comments from Aaron?
No,
No?
I have not. No, not this, not the PowerPoint.
You don't want this one? Okay.
It was the actual Word document. I mean, it should have been,
Yeah, I have it here. Hold on.
it was distributed a couple days ago. I actually think maybe I'm going to suggest once we get that up, we defer conversation, and I think John and I should probably brief the committee on the conversations we had with the selectmen yesterday. And then let people, if there's adjustments to the report as a result of those comments, I think that would make sense.
Gotcha.
You want to go, John, or you want me to go?
Basically, we yesterday in 2 separate meetings, we approached all 4 select people, went over the PowerPoint that David has now. And kind of took it through what's in the interim report, step by step, and got some reactions a lot of positive reactions. I think they were pleased with how far we've gone and how much had been done, but one thing they did say was, right, I think it was Al Gordon said it, emphasize that where we are now is kind of an inventory, you know, which I think we know, but never really verbalized per se, but that's a good way to couch it. We went through it. They were surprised to find a few things that we reported in the report. The number of vacant properties and how that map where they're scattered all over Madison. There's so many of them, so far flung. So few of them. There's a lot of them, but so few of them are really significant in terms of size and impact. Finding things like that was of interest to them. There was suggestions made at some point that future considerations of property and its adjacencies and other property, we may decide we want to recommend doing something about finding other uses for it, getting rid of it. Might be adjacent to land trust holdings. Land trust holdings are significant pieces of property, significant numbers of them. So the land trust might be something we want to look at a little bit further in terms of impact on what we're doing. We talked about future possible uses of Ryerson, future possible uses of space in Jeffrey, kind of along the lines of what we've talked about, what's in the report. And got some good response to that.
Yeah, there was one request was to try to break out the surf club recreational functions versus the town maintenance functions.
Yes.
But all the everything's kind of all lumped in, so it's very difficult to do that. So that was a suggestion of how to break it out, but I'm not sure it's possible at this stage. There was another important comment, I think, about that they would, there was a concern then for us to be thinking about that we are in a lull in terms of population of student population in the town, and that there may be a need in the next 10 to 20 years for another school to be built. So therefore, we should be anticipating preserving space for potential future site expansion for another school. So that was a comment that came out of this that I think was important. The adjacencies that was also a question. They said that as part of when we go through the titles and the deeds and the wetlands, go through, because we actually went into the assessor's AGIS map and pulled up properties, and I was demonstrating how we could actually show the abutters and things of that nature. So they wanted to say, in particular, who are the abutters for all the properties, number one, but with a particular sensitivity to the land trust, anything owned by the state or anything owned by the water company. So those were important things. That was also, I think, as John led with to try to categorize this more at this stage. Our effort has been to inventory all the information. It's not been, and it is not what to do with property, but to inventory the properties and their costs and all their components, and to emphasize that we are looking for guidance that, as a committee, we are moving in the proper direction to take the next step. There was also a suggestion that we should break out the 82 properties, and I did do some math. There are 29 properties that are over 2 acres that make up about 95% of all the land. And there are 53 properties that are under 2 acres that make up only about 40 acres of the 1,217 we have. So that was important. And then finally, it was suggested that in our presentation, we use those visuals of the visual maps that we have. And to kind of summarize it more as a graphical presentation rather than a written document. And so to that end, I assembled a briefing document before, but we also modified it. There was one thing that we did talk a lot about, and that was in the, there was a strong feeling that we weren't clear and we haven't evolved enough in terms of defining the strategic value and the rankings of the various properties. And they felt that that only confuses, it would open up a lot of questions. And, it opened up a lot of questions when we went over that piece. And so my suggestion would be for us to remove that at this stage and defer it down the road to when we're more comfortable and have a little more specific directions on that. So to that end, I actually put together a PowerPoint. So Peter, maybe you can bring up that
I want that.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, one other thing that I made a note on, it was kind of a hot button, was actual utilization of existing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
They think that will get brought up. And we haven't really addressed anything, but that's something we're gonna have to think about how to approach it, but we don't have a lot of documentation like that, other than what we saw.
Just simply include in the data the amount that each.
well, they're asking for how can we create some sort of reutilization metrics on the buildings, which was kind of part of what we were trying to do with the strategic, but we just didn't have enough data nor time.
And the problem is, it can be looked at as very subjective, because there are no matrix that we establish. It's basically on discussion, and I think not only is utilization a key issue to it, but I think it's also, where is there a need for growth or a need to expand? It's really, really hard to look at a property and say it's being well used, or how can you reutilize when you also know there's a need for growth or expansion or a change. There is a lot. And when I was doing with Nick on the factoring on the valuation, it got very confusing for me, because I really felt it was seemingly, like I said before, more subjective than it was factual based, because we didn't really have a metric or criteria. And that's why I said I wanted to do an appendix to the valuation.
Yeah.
To explain how we came to those values and the reasons behind the numbers.
There's my understanding, there is, and I think you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but there is a database of a scheduling database that shows when rooms are actually scheduled and everything's reserved or
Well,
and I'm not sure how comprehensive or how.
so I was just looking, so I've had to wrestle with this a lot, right, because of Academy. It's always been the one question. There's all the space and it's always empty and no one uses the senior center, right? So prior to the 2022 referendum, and I was trying to find this on here, we download, basically Outlook is how the rooms are scheduled. And so we talked about needing to have a software management, and the intention was we're gonna wait until Academy was online, and then we were gonna move everything to a master scheduling type of thing. And we talked about this internally, how it's needed. So there was an exercise that was done that went through and looked at bookings, highest utilization by building. And looking at calendar bookings and things like that, which doesn't capture a lot of use, but it is formal bookings and rentals and there was a report provided that Colliers pulled the data together and just listed kind of a report, and it was a spreadsheet created. So we have a first kind of high level attempt at that, just to show how much space was being used. So I'll track that down now, because I remember I was talking about this and I just don't know where it's on the website. Everything got moved around with Academy, and so I've got to find that.
Okay.
So that's the only, it's Outlook. And like the senior center has a booking program, right? Or you might not know. Yeah,
I don't do any of that.
they have a meeting room program. So there can be another exercise to do this again, start with that and kind of try to create some sort of data. But a lot of it will be also anecdotal, I would say. It's a combination. They interview the staff too to talk about the rooms and how they're used and where there's issues and stuff like that.
I would say
So-
though, excuse me, David, addition to that, it's also, where's there a need for growth? That you have the utilization as to, are you being efficient? Is it being maximized? How can we maximize it? Where would it be better place to make that happen? But you also have situations where growth is an issue, where you have an existing situation, maybe like the town campus or the youth and family services, places like that, where they are is not enough and they need to expand. So it's a complete picture. When we were doing this evaluation, it was not just, are they being efficient, but are they being stymied? And then how does that impact when you look at all these other properties, and where can we then look at it as a big picture and help not only those that are underutilized, but also those that have a need for growth, or those that have not grown and go in the other direction. So it's
Yeah, and we'll get
it's a
into a lot of,
big picture.
it gets into a lot of the programming discussions, like, we would offer X, Y, and Z if we had the space, that type of thing. So you're right. I mean, and this is something we wrestle with. I'll be honest, I'm preparing for the academy presentations, and I'm gonna have to talk about revenue. And I've done a little model and square foot and hourly rental fees, and just was really thinking about this and thinking about like occupancy rates, like how 7 days a week, opening hours, so we've been going through this exercise, but until you have the facility to show people and what the capabilities are, you're not gonna, you're not gonna be able to really, put a number on what that can be. So,
I think at this stage, we can comfortably say that at the inventory night, we're really kind of high level identifying opportunity areas, and then any kind of utilization is part of a next step. I think that's fair to.
I think so, and I think we'll have some good building blocks to start with, but it'll need a lot more work.
And I'll reemphasize as well what John said, that there was, I would say, uniformly positive responses from the select on what we've done, and appreciative not only of what we've done, but how much we've done in a relatively short period of time. And I know we felt that it's been slugging in through this, but it's kind of all assembled itself quickly at the end here in a good way. So I think everybody should be commended for it, for the amount of time and efforts that everybody's put into this so far. So to that end, I thought it might be useful to have some to share with everybody here tonight and get your feedback. I took the report and kind of converted it to a slide deck, and then incorporated some of the other comments that they were talking about to try to point it in terms of a conversational discussion. The report, I think, can stand on its own, but I think it's pretty straightforward. It was important, I think, to remind, I put the charge as the very first function, very first slide, because it was the one thing that came clear was they were thought that this was a charge of looking at the existing buildings, but not looking at the land as well. So that came out, and we reminded them that was part of the charge. Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It says it right in the chart.
Yeah, so that was part of it. So in terms of a function, I use that word inventory, develop an inventory of town land and buildings, find a fact-finding approach to evaluate, compile and provide evidential research. So again, trying to emphasize the words facts, and that this is not, we're not making judgments at this stage. We're just trying to present the facts in terms of what's existing, and then to finally support the planning effort, actions for the town and the various governing boards to take actions as appropriate. So that was kind of, and then our approach has been inventory all the town properties and their use, define the 10 years of operating and capital costs for buildings and properties, which we've done, at least, or collected, maybe I should say the word collected, the 10 years were defined, I'm not sure which is a better word. And then identify opportunities for improved efficiency of facility use, define properties that may satisfy other town needs, and understand both the cost and revenue benefits from any actions recommended. I mean, and those, the latter two are more second steps, I think, of what we'll be doing here, if they go forward. So this past year, we've collected 3 years of operating costs, 2 years of 2 years of operating costs in the school buildings, 3 years for all the rest of the buildings. We've collected the various capital costs from all the various studies, developed an inventory of town-owned properties from the assessor's office, and then obviously conducted several physical visitations to facilities to understand some of the strategic value assessment of each building. Then I've gotten into some graphics. So preliminary findings, 82 parcels, total 1,217 acres. I broke it out based on their conversations that 82 properties have, of the 82 properties, 14 have building. So that, you know, that's important. It's 267.5 acres, or 22%. 29 properties are 2+ acres, which is 35% of the properties, but 97% of the land. Interesting. Which is important. And 53 properties are under 2.2 acres, which is only 3% of the land mass. I'm not sure I want to incorporate this next chart. I think it's going to be extremely hard to see and difficult, but that was the one that was put together by our intern.
Sprague, yeah.
That basically is, it's the same thing as the previous chart, but it's the acreage of each property versus the location. I think we'll probably leave this out.
Yeah.
I just think, you know. Preliminary findings, basically we spend just under $5 million a year on operating and maintenance of the town buildings, both schools and town buildings. And the capital investment is roughly $100 million over the next 7 to 10 years. That excludes the academy. And this is clearly the CIP kind of items, so it's roofs and boilers and painting and repairs. When we looked at the space, I think it was important to just remind people that the town, the space in 2025 versus 2026. This was actually one interesting question that was raised by one of the segment, that they thought that it was an even swap of square footage between the new school and the schools going offline. They didn't realize that the actual number, the actual schools, even with the new school in 2026, we're going to be having less school space than we do today. So the actually its space is greater than that. You know, and it was interesting because I actually went back and looked and double checked because the 52,000 square foot Jeffrey excludes the portables.
Yeah, okay.
That excludes the portables.
Yeah.
So, you know, so you
That
got
was a surprise.
52,000 at Jeffrey
Yeah,
plus Ryerson,
right.
so that you're got about 80,000 square feet just in those two buildings.
And
The
okay.
Learning Center obviously adds another few thousand.
And the new school is,
89.
60,000,
89.
89,000.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I was gonna ask you about that. I saw
Oh, okay, well,
62.
that's
I
important.
saw
because
62 in the report. I'm like, I think it's closer to 90,000.
I went on the website of the new building and that was the number that's on the website. It's 62,000 square feet.
was this when we added
You wanna
the four classrooms, I wonder if that could have been the difference? The original ed specs had a smaller school and they added 4 classrooms to it because the enrollment has gone up.
Okay, so,
Huh?
We would have probably around 82,000 without those classrooms.
Okay, yeah, so that's not the big thing.
because 62 was on the website. It was in the minute, or it was in the approved budget or something like that. It said
I saw that
62,000 square feet. Because I went through the website.
Like recently, or
I
You're talking about-
don't recall which
it could have
document
been
I
an
looked at.
original schematic before it was actually.
It was the
designed.
approved, I mean, I think it was under the approved project.
The lowest I ever saw advertised was about 80,500,
So what is the correct square footage?
89,000 plus or
89.
minus.
89,000, okay. All right, well,
So we should.
that changes this, so I'll modify.
Yeah, it would be
to
helpful though to
62.
make sure that we have the updated, because there was, original concept, right, when it went to referendum, but then the whole thing got designed and they added some classroom, it evolved after the referendum.
All right, well, that's why we do these meetings. Uh, And I don't, so that'll change this middle bar, the school bar, the yellow, obviously, will go up by about 20,000, 25,000 square feet.
25,000, yeah. 26.
Um,
So,
And then, but the 28% of vacant space will go from 8 to 28% will be the amount of vacant space. So that would include Academy, Ryerson,
I would note
Jeffrey.
that,
yes.
yeah, put a little note on there just showing, because Academy, in theory, could be open and usable in 2026, but it's not. It'll be end of 2026 is what they're targeting. But I just note that because people will be looking at.
Okay, I'll put a footnote on that.
Yeah, I would definitely put a footnote on the vacancy piece.
Okay. This was right out of the report, the next chart that basically, when by going through and sorting the properties, we identified approximately between 250 and 300 acres of land that might be suitable for other types of potential developments. And then the adjacency was, actually, this was an important thing that all of the selectmen commented on, that they thought it was really important to come right forward, that specific adjacencies should be considered, so that retaining ownership of these, the town retaining ownership of these properties is important because of the adjacencies to other buildings. And, Academy, Memorial, Town Hall, Jeffrey, Ryerson, and the Town Campus Learning Center. So not necessarily retaining them in their current form, but retaining those properties. And I think that ties to the comment on potential building sites for future schools. Parcels that are currently used by the town, and in which we identified as potential use, alternative use, was the bus garage on Nathan's Way, as well as the DPW site. Obviously, there's a caveat on the DPW about hopefully combining that with the potential opportunity to combine that with the buildings and grounds functions for the Park Beach and Rec. But obviously, it's going to require significant more analysis and understanding before any recommendation would be made on this.
I think this is really picky, but I think Nathan's is really Nathan's lane.
What is, it should be,
You got it as Nathan's way. I think it's.
oh,
Nathan's lane.
it's Nathan's Lane, you're correct.
I did stop the world.
No, I'll fix that. And they suggested sharing these kind of overview maps that of the AGIS system that kind of, because they were surprised that, because obviously we do show where the potential wetlands may be on these maps, but that this is, they thought there was a lot more usable land there. That was a conversation that from the selectman that's very aware of the buses was commenting on, that he felt that they didn't have enough parking,
Yeah.
other things, and they were surprised they didn't develop it more. That you could develop it more there, or, but that was clearly one of the comments that was out there, that there are opportunities there to do something else. That this was the graphically shows you where the current DPW site on Fort Path is and the vacant and parcel that is undeveloped, it's right next door that we own, the town owns as well.
The one to the right across the street.
The right that's owned by
That's private.
Everett.
That's Everett.
It's private, yeah.
You're talking to the left.
To the left where the arrow is,
Sorry.
yeah, so the two arrows are.
Are those separate parcels? I didn't realize because
Yes.
one is elevated, right? This is-
Yeah, those are
I
two
didn't-
separate parcels of land, there are two separate
We
parcels.
were talking
It has to
about-
do with the old abandoned road
Yeah,
that
Yeah,
goes through there,
Good
that
street.
separates the two parcels.
well, I'm just saying, we went through this in high school, if we're gonna do anything there, we gotta consolidate the
Yeah.
parcels, so. Yeah, it took a while. We had to do that for, well, your business extension, because it was all separate parcels, so it took months.
Yeah.
To delay the project, so I don't wanna be dealing with that again.
And then obviously, we talked about developing properties that, the 200 to 300 acres. So we targeted the first time owner housing, which would be higher density type of housing potentially, lower cost housing in the Fort Path area and the Cops Road area. That's part of Bar Farm. Then the traditional residential housing would be Ridge Road area, the acreage that's adjacent to Ryerson and Brown. And then in Rockland, and the commercial use area would be the Nathan's Lane, and the 79 north of the train station. So I.
Do you talk anywhere though, how the Ridge Road is, you get to it in terms of how that's actually where our personal leaf is?
What?
Well, that's where our
The
personal
stump
leaf, it's being used.
I apologize, I didn't hear what you said.
That was part of the conversation, that scenario. Not all of that is, as it stands now, not all.
Some are vacant, some.
Right, yeah,
Some will
so,
be.
yeah, I'm just saying, you're gonna have a page that'll talk about how it's currently being used.
Yes,
Ridge Road. Okay.
Right,
Yes,
Yeah, I do.
so if we go, this is the farm area east of Cops Road versus the west of Cops Road is the existing farm with heavy uses. There are some usage in terms of temporary parking on this parcel, but other than that, it's pretty wide open.
I'm still stunned at how big that is, I had no idea.
It's almost 23 acres.
Yeah.
It's huge. And this is the Ridge Road where the bulky waste, the next slide. Yeah, so therefore, when that gets blown up, you can see that the bulky waste site is in the middle of that property. And then the couple towers are on the property to the left, but everywhere where there's a green flag is a property that's owned by the town. So we actually own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 separate parcels there that total almost 80 acres.
What were people's reactions to that?
They were amazed.
Yeah.
They were totally surprised.
Yeah, I
That-
think
that
out of
there is that
any of
much-
this, that's the one that I was like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah,
And the Bower too, I didn't
Yeah.
realize how big that parcel
I
was.
had no
They
idea.
were both
Yeah.
were, there was both a big surprise to
Yeah.
both of everybody, yeah.
Are we confident in that data, like in terms of, I'm just wondering, do we want to do a little?
Part of the intern's job was to
You
go
check
through
the
the
deed
deed
research. Okay,
research,
good.
so they're all clear.
Okay,
The only deed restriction is on Cops Road, is the Bauer Farm it's in the request that affordable housing is one of the functions.
yeah,
So that would be dedicated to, you probably could not do traditional residential housing there and be consistent with the request. But there are no deed restrictions on Ridge Road here at all. It is probably, and this was one of the ones that said, all right, who are the abutters and what's happening? Because one of the things that they raised is that, which I didn't realize, was the clients, that they're talking about a permit for solar panels, a solar panel field there. And that kind of does impact this area. Because this,
Wait,
the bulky waste.
So-
this-
Oh,
Bulky
so
waste.
we want to go back to the bulky waste site?
Oh, I didn't realize that was, adjacent to, or I guess
Yeah,
it's,
it's just to the right of the
Right.
bulky waste site in the middle, that's where Klein's is. So it's. on
Right
that edge
in
there.
here, right on this side here, where the cursor
oh,
is.
right, okay, yeah, no, I mean, they're putting in, solar panels,
yeah.
but it's all gonna be screened
Yeah,
interior,
so,
yeah.
so that's just, because I thought,
Solar farm.
I thought at one point in time he was talking about selling that to potentially be developed as housing.
Somehow we landed on the solar thing, which I was kind of surprised, because it seems like a great location and,
Yeah,
right, yeah.
Well, it's an interesting question of butters, if this is something that the town ultimately is interested in, knowing that.
Manos will be able to hook his pizza up.
Yeah, and then,
Charge your car while you're getting it.
yeah, you're right. So the next is the slide is the Brown Ryerson complex. And the green flags are all the properties adjacent. So that basically there's two properties that are just north of the large one in the middle there. So you got two green flags on the two properties, and it's another 20 acres.
So the ones to the right though, but there's nothing, they're not contiguous? So that one that's got the flag all over the right?
Yeah, there's
okay.
there's one at the top and then there's one to the right of that. Right,
So this is the whole school complex right here.
that's the school complex.
This is a piece of property and that's a piece of
Yeah,
property
those
that
are
the
the two
town owns.
properties we own.
But there's no axe, I guess that corner is
Doesn't look
there.
like it now.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, ultimately, if we
Right here.
do
so
something.
landlocked then, that one parcel, right?
If I'm correct, that was where the old wells were for the property.
That's what I recall.
You create an access road, I would think, from Ryerson and 79 through the Ryerson property into that area,
Into the northern one.
into the northern. one.
Yeah.
I don't know how to get to this, I don't know how to get to the other, eastern one.
Huh, yeah, it would be interesting to see who owns those other ones. I don't know the history of how we got this whole,
There is some sort of it's really hard to see. Yeah,
Some of the bigger parcels were, the town took over for lack of payment of taxes.
well, but this one in particular, the reason one of the selectmen said his recollection was that was acquired in order to preserve it for potential sites for playing fields. The one, the northern part. That was it. And then Rockland, I just put the next slide is Rockland, which is quite a large parcel, but I didn't really know. And basically, we're talking about a fraction of that, because that's
yeah.
difficult to build on, but, it needs obviously quite a bit of assessment in order to identify if there are opportunities there or not.
And there are no deed restrictions on that?
There was, I guess, you can see where they tried to do some development, I think, in part of Rockland. There's actually the previous owner,
Where it's scarred.
yeah.
I haven't been up there in years, so. And then finally, this is the property that's, the last property is the property that abuts 79 and is the site of the potential future site of the over-under. And obviously, there's a lot of wetlands in there, and a lot of forested area in there, so that has to have a lot of evaluation before you can ultimately decide potential use. So the core question is whether or not we should be, we were advised to show these pictures of these properties to this in the public meeting. So I didn't want to put up, obviously, I wasn't going to suggest we do that without everybody out here feeling comfortable.
I mean, most of these you're not gonna,
Spend more than a minute.
yeah, but also I'm just trying to think, is there gonna be somebody in the public going, oh my God, they're gonna sell off, the Ridge Road and, the neighbors around there, but, and obviously Bauer Park is gonna be one that will, people a lot of people get upset about.
Well, people might get excited about it too. Other groups that would get excited about it too. So, yeah. And then the last two slides, the last slide really goes to potential adaptive reuse. That obviously needs to be evaluated. And again, the goal here is to minimize or fully offset any redevelopment costs by identifying potential funding sources through tax revenues and sale of land or other types of functions that will fund this adaptive reuse. So Memorial Town Hall, or a question of whether or not it can be restored to its original design as a meeting and performance space. Jeffrey, which is over 50,000 square feet, obviously is in an important spot in the town and adjacencies. There could be a lot of opportunities. There could be offices, performance spaces, studies, studios. It could be other types of classrooms. Ryerson, we felt that the review there really had to be completed, and that in general, we think even though the school department thinks it should be demolished, we're not sure all of it should be demolished.
So,
There may be portions of it that should be saved.
so the Graham, the chair of the Neck River School, is going to be starting to do a hazardous materials assessment of Ryerson, because that's part of like the budget for the new school. Why it was done, I don't understand, but it was. I'm just wondering, we should have a discussion, because I feel like if we're gonna be hiring consultants, let's make sure we're getting everything we want out of, the analysis, right? And right now, his marching orders are, school's gonna get demolished, hazardous materials assessment, right? So I think, let's talk to them, and maybe there's some sort of scope piece in there that we can add to make sure that we're capturing questions, because we'll answer questions from the public, like why.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's
Why don't we try to
it's the
sell it?
bigger open spaces, I think, that would be most usable.
Oh,
If they can be preserved. I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's potential maintenance sites, whether it's potential storages for document storage or, all those kind of type of things, furniture, cold storage type of opportunities. I mean, there's, because there are, the cafeteria areas and the gymnasium, I think the multi-use, multifunction room there. Those are the two questions that I have.
demolition is gonna cost $2-3 million, it sounds like, so it's kind of, yeah, so I'm just thinking, I'll follow up with you next week. I don't know where, I mean, do you attend those building meetings yet? I know they're looking, he sent me something, I don't know, they're gonna probably hire somebody soon, right? They're not,
Yeah, I did hear that, but I don't
Yeah,
know, I don't know what the
okay.
timeframe is.
so I'll reach out to him next week. I just think it would be helpful to coordinate and make sure there's a way to tag on, other things, other activities that they could be doing, that we should do
I
that.
believe at the last building, committee, correct me if I'm wrong, that they did approve $40,000 to begin the hazardous material study. So that's already in the queue.
Yeah, no, it's definitely in the queue, but in terms of actually going out and, I don't know if they are doing an RFP, or are they doing?
Part of, I believe, well, they were gonna use Langdon because it's the town's.
That's right, it's a town.
It's the town's
yeah.
hygienist. But
Okay.
part of that, scope of work is to give a solid estimate of what it's gonna take to demolish the building.
Right. So if we were to do like a septic assessment and stuff like that, that would be a different company?
Langen might have that capability.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean,
Because that would be worthwhile, I think, doing as well.
There's a hygienist that does have that, it would be fine.
Yeah, okay,
I
So-
actually, I just found the site map for it today. So I found the septic tank and
Yeah.
fields and everything.
yeah, well, I remember you were talking about that, and I was thinking, because with Island Avenue, that really was a big
Those are
piece of
wells.
the,
Those are wells up there, right? I assume.
It's off Connecticut Water Company,
It's off.
which has wells up in the back area
Oh.
of one of the properties that we have.
remember they had that whole, you uranium issue.
Yeah, right, that's why I was
Yeah.
wondering if you're gonna test the water and put it all those.
Well, water is gonna be a problem up there, in general, so that will have to be thought through, but, okay, well, maybe offline, we'll figure out a way to see if it makes sense to tag on a few things to that study.
Okay. All right, and then the final slide is really just saying what are, if Board of Selectmen think we're going in the right direction, these are what we plan to do as our next steps. The number one, obviously, is to, of these properties, to do much more deeper dive in terms of analysis to understand all the various deed and this north site restrictions, all the properties that we highlighted in this presentation. Second is to understand property adjacencies to other large landowners in the town. Third would be developing cost benefit analysis on each of these, on any potential initiative to be incorporated into a town-wide facilities master plan. Spend a lot of coordination with obviously a host of town offices and committees, and governing commissions. Develop an initial draft of the town-wide master plan and then provide a timetable for how we can bring recommendations to the board. So,
The only thing, obviously the big question mark is because of the renewal plan, right? And we're gonna have these vacant buildings, and there's gonna be a lot of like, how are we going to, what's our strategy to address those vacant buildings? So I'm just wondering, do we weave in some sort of thought process or timeline to address that?
well, that's part of the master plan.
It's part of the
It
master
has to be
plan.
part of the because obviously the vacant buildings are all identified as
Yeah.
properties under consideration.
But is there
I could be specific in that the properties under consideration, including the vacant part, including future.
Well, like I would
vacant
think,
buildings.
yeah, I think there really has, because I do think that, this is all kind of culminating together, right? The housing discussion and the vacant properties discussion. Obviously, Academy will be a huge wrench in this if it doesn't pass May 6th, so, in terms of vacancy, so I'm just trying to think how somehow we need to be able to know that there's gonna be we're not gonna be able to make all these decisions at once. There's gonna be like a decision tree, right, that we're gonna have to go through.
I think I have a sense of where you're going, or I could be
Yeah.
wrong, but these buildings are gonna be vacant before any determination is probably made as to what's going to happen with these properties. So what is the plan to take care of these properties after they become vacant? So they just don't sit there vacant and ending up like the Academy did, just totally void of any attention whatsoever. So I think there may be a need for some consideration as why we go through this process. These schools are gonna be vacant as of June of this year.
June 30th.
How are these gonna be handled until such time as a determination is made as to what the next steps are, if I'm understanding?
No, I would agree, that would be important, but I guess my other thing is there has to be a prioritization of decision-making, right?
Yes.
Because you've got so many different factions here, so there has to be what rises up, and a decision on one thing cascades to a decision on another, right? So I'm trying to think through about,
It's what a master plan.
yeah, well,
It's a domino effect.
yeah, it's a domino effect, exactly, so, I'm just saying, so we're never gonna have a plan that's good, this is gonna be used for this is gonna be used for this is gonna be used for this, you know what I mean? I see it as more of like a process map, I guess, decision-making process map.
Because one thing is going to affect the other. You make a decision here, it's going to,
Right.
has an impact.
Honestly, the biggest decision, I think the biggest domino is the Academy vote. That ultimately, because if the Academy vote goes positive, then a lot of these buildings and the space that we have here
Right.
probably should be torn down.
Yeah.
If the Academy goes negative, we may
Right.
want to readapt other spaces
Right.
for office
Right, to
spaces or
address
for
needs,
other
right.
types of functions. So, that, in many respects, a lot of what we're going to do is gonna hinge on what happens in the academy decision. I think.
Yeah.
In a big way. I mean,
Yeah.
the only things that in this whole thing that, I think the only things that don't affect that is lands that potentially could be redeveloped for other purposes, residential or commercial. Those lands are completely outside, of the academy function, or the academy decision. And any kind of adaptive reuse of, if we want to consolidate, like, if we want to consolidate the bus garage in with school properties, for example, because those school properties are becoming vacant, that would be, that's obviously independent of any academy decision.
But I think part of that equation is, to Charmaine's point, what do you do with those properties in the meantime? Because they're not going to get redeveloped in the next couple of years. So I think we need to know, how long is the roof going to last on each one of those? How long is the building on?
At the same token, I don't think anything is going to be of substance between now and the fall on any of those buildings.
It might be worth though putting on there as a next step to outline a maintenance, yeah, for existing,
Or
for
for
existing
safety as
vacant.
well as
Yeah.
the integrity of.
That might
what's
help
there.
address just that,
Okay, well, that's fine.
Yeah.
But, so basically, maybe under the detailed analysis, why don't I put a sub-bullet there, if you will, say, including, this analysis will be include but not limited to vacant buildings and their ongoing maintenance until decisions can be made.
If they were going to be repurposed, Ryerson or Jeffrey, how soon would they be repurposed? 3 years?
When is there a
I mean,
definitive?
it depends on what, to this point.
The
if-
academy building.
Yeah, if we had the academy building,
If it
there's
leaks-
really gonna be limited repurposing needs, right, for those for those buildings. So then the town is faced with, sale or demo and, development. So, those decisions, I think, I would hope we would be on a 2 to 3 year time frame to have a vote or something. I was trying to think. I mean, Island Avenue, really went very quickly.
That was, it seemed to me that was almost
What?
a really unicorn scenario where town was looking to offload and there happened to be a Catholic school looking. for
But there was
spot.
I'm just saying from a process standpoint, there was
Once the
yeah,
decision was.
right, yeah,
I got you.
yeah, it was committee, year evaluation, public input, recommendation of the Board of Selectmen moved it forward, went to referendum. That was like a 2-year process. So I'm just thinking
Yeah.
that, like, so that's best case scenario. Hopefully we don't have a 20-year scenario yet at Academy.
What if
You're
that
gonna-
roof starts leaking 6 months from now and it leaks for a year and a half? and we
Yeah.
Move Board of Ed there, it changes that equation quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah,
Because the cost to the academy, when you look at it, it has a high cost because it's been neglected
Yes.
100% for 20 years. You don't want to repeat the same thing with these two
Right.
schools. If you really think that there's even the slightest potential of reutilizing it, then don't let it go to hell in a handbag, because you're going to be at the same point where it's an extraordinary cost because
Well,
it's been neglected.
well, there was a decision made a long time ago to turn off all the utilities to the building, right? And that is not the intention now to do that, so,
Let me just,
yeah.
to kind of close this and keep this on track, I'm suggesting to add under number 1A, that would say, this analysis will include but not be limited to vacant buildings and the ongoing maintenance of the facilities until the master plan is complete.
Well put.
Yeah, I like it.
Okay, there's something wrong, that's in essence what we're trying to say here, right? How are we going to manage these buildings?
We're going to keep an eye on the ball.
Until the plan is done.
It's very good.
I guess I'm just looking at like that townwide facilities master plan. I think you need to explain, and this might be verbally, what that is, because people are like, oh, they're gonna do another plan, right? So, you know, the idea is to come out with action items, right? About, you know, and like I said, it's really gonna be a decision-making matrix. Assuming Academy were to pass, the decision-making tree looks very different, right?
Correct.
So I think it just might be worth talking about that.
Jeffrey and
Yeah,
probably for Jeffrey. I mean, in all
Yeah.
likelihood, it's Jeffrey and Memorial Town Hall would be
Yeah.
the,
right.
the how would be where the decision tree would be affected.
What is the timeline for the academy? Is it a couple of years out? or-
No, the May 6th, we're voting to increase the budget. And the budget's at 15.9 million bonding, but we want to use our grants. We have 7.5 million in grants. We want to use that on top of that to fund it. So you're just approving using the grants to fund the additional budget. That vote is May 6th. Then we would basically go out to bid again a month later, and the timeline would be contracts, awards, and construction starts in the fall. So fall of 2026.
What happens if it's come in higher?
I mean, we're already dealing with one full bidding process that went in, and this is baked on that bidding process. So, and there's also room in this to value engineer. I mean, if we get another $8 million blowout, you know, I'm done. We might, you know, if there's $1 million, there's enough in there to scope, you know, change scope. There's a lot of contingency. We added more contingency in the budget. So it's like at 24 million now. You know, we're basing this off of real bids from the market that was in December. So we know that we're at risk again, but it's the last chance really for this. If it fails, there's no community center. It's probably gonna be demolition for the building. Because you can't afford to do it's gonna cost $20 million to do anything.
May be able to save the very front of it. something like that.
But even, yeah,
Even that is probably a $10 million.
Yeah. And so, you know, that this is really kind of, if we want to have this as a community space for the public to use, this is what it's gonna cost. And you know, it's gonna be 15.9 million of bonding, and then our grants will go to it. So we're actually meeting with state in 2 weeks to look at the tax credit grants too, which we hadn't fully explored. That could be millions of dollars. So that would help if we got that as well. So I think the problem with this is that, you know, I'm very clear in the presentation that it's likely demolition is really probably one of the only options for it. But, you know, the board will have to go through an exercise quickly afterwards and then make the call. So we'll know May 7th. So.
That quickly?
Oh, so does this slide deck make sense to keep guiding our presentation for Monday night?
I agree.
It's well done.
And I will make these few minor edits and get it out in the morning to everybody again. So, you guys won't have any comments on it. Now, I guess the core question is, based on this slide deck, are there any adjustments to this document?
Oh, did you get that whole Sage thing cleared up?
Yes.
Because there was, I was a little confused about that.
It got taken out. That was my fault.
Okay.
And what happened was when we downloaded the data from the assessor's office
Yeah,
and started manipulating it, we trimmed the length of the field so that the actual number of the property that was in the assessor's database was the same as the Jansen's property. So it's
okay, because
the
I was
Jansen's
surprised, I
property-
remember when I saw that, I was like,
So the
I thought
Jansen's
it was only-
property has,
Yeah.
has, it's 48-36 or whatever it might have been. And then there's playing fields that are just east of your building, that is 48-36-1. That -1 got
Right.
concatenated out in the data manipulation. So it looked like the Jansen property was owned by the town of
Yeah.
Madison. And when I said this is, and in our conversations, it came out that said, it got called, I don't know how it got called, but we started calling it the Lesage property, and
Yeah.
it wasn't, because the Lesage property is on Cops
The other
Road.
side, yeah, the Cops Road one,
And-
that's why I
and-
was.
And so basically, I just said.
Yeah.
Just get rid of it, take it out, it's a, I think it's the only mistake we made in this whole thing, I mean, given the hundreds and
yeah.
hundreds of
Well,
data points that we took place, so I think that was okay, but that was what happened.
yeah, so because the Sage property, we actually did a appraisal on it and looked at selling that at one point because historically, I don't know if Seth commented on this, the Board of Education, when they purchased the property, they, the plan was to sell that parcel off to help pay for the property. And
Well, that was
it
not
just,
what was told, we talked about it.
oh, no, there was,
They said
yeah.
they originally bought it because it was anticipated as
Expansion, right.
expansion into the
No, it was
new high school
expansion,
there.
right, you're right there, but then when we did the Jansen purchase though for the new school, there was people on the Board of Ed that were saying then, or Board of Finance, that were saying, well, then you justified it for this piece of Lesage property, why don't we sell that? So we did a appraisal on it.
I would think.
It was broken up, there was two parcels, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my view
Yeah.
is that if we're gonna adhere to our concept of adjacency, that's an important adjacency.
I know, but the problem is there was a house on it too that we have to figure out what to do with, just sitting there. So,
But it's-
Wasn't that purchase though to get, wasn't the town leasing?
They
Their
were leasing-
property for several years?
they were for the ball
Leasing the
fields.
Jansen property.
Yeah.
for-
No, the Lesage property, I think was.
Lesage,
Yeah,
341,000 a year
Yeah.
or something like that.
for the fields, and then they said that we're gonna use this all for the expansion, the original design. But there was a parcel there that, but it was in there, I guess it was two parcels, and then they ended up, that one parcel is still there owned by the town. And the idea was you could sell that off to help fund the new school that we bought the Neck River parcel for. But, anyway, so I'm just saying, it's developable, you can put like 4 houses on it, we have an appraisal done,
Yeah,
so.
and that, I think it's probably too late to introduce something like that at this.
Oh, no, I'm not saying put it in that, but I'm just flagging it because you,
Yeah, I think we should look at it. I think
well,
we
you know,
should
there's
put it-
some
take a look
people
at
in
it
the
down
public, influential people in the public that will probably ask about that stuff. So, why are you selling the property that you said that we could use to fund for the Neck River School, so. People have long memories in this town, so.
All right, so I guess the best course of action is make sure that this, everything in here is consistent with the interim report. Revise the interim report, get it out to everybody, if I get it out to everybody tomorrow. Please review it ASAP, because any kind of, how do we distribute it? I assume we distributed it in a package to the board of selectmen.
So, yeah,
on Monday.
the packet usually goes out at noon tomorrow. I mean, I can send it out over the weekend if you want to go find it, so they've seen the report though, have they already?
They have a draft of this
Yeah,
report.
and I can just tell Janie that, a revised version of the report will be coming over the weekend, but as long as they get it.
Well, hopefully, if I get it in front of everybody right away, I mean, I don't think there's any significant changes that are going to happen to this report, other than I'll use the word inventory a little more
Yeah.
prominently.
Well, it'll change the vacancy, numbers for the schools.
Correct, I want to get
Yeah.
the school numbers correct.
Yeah.
As well,
Yeah.
so 89,000 square feet.
Yeah, I will email you tonight with the exact.
Thank you.
But that's around it.
All right. Okay, well, we're home stretch here then. Anything else then tonight to look at? Any other business? Because I think that basically covers the last the two agenda items, the review of the report and structure of the presentation. Oh, the only other thing is I would think, and I don't think it's a problem, but I would hope that all the members would be there at the Board of Selectmen presentation.
I mean, I'll be there.
But I mean, you know, Charmaine,
But yeah, you're all,
John.
yeah, I would all
I
attend
think-
if you
I
can.
think
That'd be good.
everybody should be
Attend the
there.
meeting.
I was gonna say,
And-
do you want us to
And
attend?
the question is, what would, I mean, I think it gets kind of clumsy having multiple people present. I think, and-
Usually just the chair does, you know, and
But
then
I
you might,
mean, if there are
there's a specific
questions,
thing that you.
or if there are
Or they could
comments
just
that we
get
want
to know us. I mean, it'd be a
Yeah.
good way for them to put faces to our
Yes.
names. But
But are there specific comments that, I think, on any of these slides that may make sense for you to provide color on? You know, you guys would be the color commentators and or gauge, you know.
Well, let's put it this
Yeah,
way, when your
when you're out
eye
there
lands on
making a
us, we know we
presentation,
need to speak.
oftentimes
Right.
you get caught by somebody asks a question or somebody asks a
Well,
direction
and it may be that
need some help.
we go past something that we all know should be said, and whatever reason, we jump to the next topic, and one of us can pipe up.
Yeah, type of thing.
Yeah, I'm used to that.
The one thing I do feel, looking at this, is we absolutely need to start doing a deep dive in the utilization factor, which means we've got to get our hands on speaking directly with people, seeing reports, seeing these bookings.
Well, maybe that should be on your, is that just, you know, utilization
Yeah,
analysis?
I mean, we need to
Steps.
talk
Yeah.
about that and organize
Yeah.
it, because we can't,
And
I don't want to frighten anybody by getting in front of them and asking them this information.
it definitely did get brought up yesterday. That's true.
It's been an ongoing question, you know, we have people now FOIAing all kinds of documents, you know, like calendars, actually, I'll just get the information that Austin had to put together for the FOIA request.
Yeah, sure.
Because basically, that's what, you know, some of the data that's needed, to do the analysis. The stuff that we did a few years ago was, you know, during the middle of COVID, and that was another,
Well, I think
no, but they looked at the old calendar, actually, the calendar data that he was using was actually 2019 calendar data. So it'll have to be updated.
But I think it would probably, Nick, if you agree, maybe we can sit down and look at what actual data we want to look, to sort of start looking at this, like growth, need for growth, maximum utilization, the whole 9 yards, and then we can strategize and coordinate, who do we talk to, where do we get the data? Because I really feel like I'm somewhat floundering a bit on this valuation side of it, because I didn't feel like I had data. I felt it was really based on the walkthroughs, observations, talking to people, looking at reports and things like this. And then I think we need to just.
We scratched the surface of it, particularly with youth and family services, speaking to a couple of the other properties, but yeah, by and large, it's.
Well, and that's where it worked well with you and I, though, to see if we were on the same page based on observations, because he really did his numbers, I did my numbers, and we said, kind of looked at where we were, if we were far apart, if we were near. And I would say majority of the case, we were
Very close.
right on. So you just need to now put facts behind it. You must be tired.
I mean, do I look better? I'm really tired. Yeah. It's been a while. 5 years.
5 years? Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, 6 years.
Then you must have became select person the year I moved here.
November 2019.
We moved here in September 20.
Huh? Okay.
So you're the name, you're the only name we've ever known. And we voted.
Hopefully that's a good thing. Yeah, I think Academy is probably most of the lines on my face. That's the one
I think-
project. I call it the albatross of every first selectman in Madison. So it's because it's every first selectman went through over the last 20 years, you know. A lot of, you know, I was trying to put a comprehensive list of all the committees that have studied. You were on one of them, right?
I
saw
was the
your-
chair of one of them.
So you're report, I was just flipping through that again, just kind of,
It's
because I was.
exactly what was come out in
Yeah.
2019.
Yeah, and it was a great report though, too, and,
I have it I have it.
and I was
here.
refreshing myself on the history of the building, you know, looking at the pictures, I kind of got lost in this today, because I was like, just trying to step back again and be like, oh my God, what, you know, here we are again.
That turned out to be, I mean, I thought it was the committee there
Yeah.
that we did a really good job on that report, but it
Yeah.
was an election year, unfortunately, and it wasn't brought
Yeah.
forward because of that.
The 2012 one that you were.
2012 was an
Yeah.
election year, so we issued
Yeah.
the report in May or
Yeah.
June of 2012, and the election was in November.
Yeah.
And basically, the
No
selectmen at
action
the
after
time,
that.
Eleanor was that I'm not gonna have this stuff as part of the conversation in an election year. And then it got pushed off. I mean, that's the one nice thing about going to a 4-year term versus
Yeah.
a 2-year
Yeah.
term, because basically you don't do something the first 6 months of a 2-year term, you're not gonna do it.
Yeah, I know.
You get stuck.
Well, especially something like
Campaigning right
this.
away.
Yeah.
As soon as you win, you
Yeah.
got a campaign.
Yeah,
Well-
it's really tough.
And there-
So I just was playing with this.
oh, we're still on our meeting, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I just
Yeah.
under next steps. So what I did was what made sense to complete further analysis for the properties under consideration. A, to understand the deed and or site deed title and site restrictions. B, to identify the ongoing maintenance needs for vacant buildings and the ongoing maintenance needs of facilities until the master plan is completed. And C, to document property adjacencies to other landowners. So it kind of combines those 2 or 3 of the comments together, and I think that kind of captures our conversation here.
I was just thinking the utilization thing,
Oh, right, and I want to add that utilization thing.
and I think it's a good one to highlight for sure, because it does come up all the time. So is it, when you look at these buildings, and you use the term, when I was doing my academy analysis, I was using the term occupancy, but really utilization would be a better way to describe.
Yeah,
Utilization of space versus occupancy is like a real estate.
It's a head count.
Yeah.
Well,
I had-
there's-
Yeah, right,
there's
okay,
multiple ways, I mean, I've
Yeah.
done a lot of utilization,
Yeah.
facilities utilization studies, and, you know, basically, you have room and position utilization. So those are whenever you're on a university dealing with these kind of things, and this is not that different, you know, this is a good example. This room is being utilized for this period of time, right? But the occupancy of this room is probably at 15% of what
It's misleading.
what its capacity is.
right,
So, because you're trying to match, proper
right,
numbers of people to not proper room
right,
sizes.
right,
And
okay.
other things, so, and,
Yeah.
obviously, part of the utilization is technology in the room. It's the type of furnishings that are in the room. I mean, all those components are incorporated into a utilization study to really understand why a room is used or why it's not. So many times you have rooms that are perfectly good rooms, but they're never utilized because they don't have Wi-Fi. Or they don't have,
Right,
they have furniture that are, basically folding chairs rather than nice desks.
more of that
So,
all could be.
So it's good, and then,
Yeah.
so obviously that's the
Yeah.
kind of functions that the detail that
Utilization
has
would
to
be
be
the right
in there.
terminology then, yeah.
Yeah, so you have to really come
Yeah.
to a definition of that.
Yeah.
So anyways, okay. I did want to ask one other thing, if John, Charmaine, and Nick, if you can kind of give me 2-sentence, 3-sentence bio. So when I introduce you as part of the committee, I can just say, this is your background, quick background, because I mean, you all have such deep and broad facilities understandings and obviously in different areas.
On education
And I think
included
it's
in
an
that?
interesting way to demonstrate that the perspectives that we have here as a committee there's quite a bit of expertise on this camp.
I think that shows through with the report, for sure. guys have done a great job, a lot of good input.
All right, well, with that, if there's any other new business, is there any public comments? Do we have anybody from the public on?
We did have one attendee, but they're no longer on.
All right, so with that, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Second? Second, all in favor, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Raquel.